Welcome to Confessions of a Cleaning Business Owner. I'm Louise Trehearn here with Diane Greenwood, and we are talking about why your cleaning training isn't working. I think that's what we're talking about, isn't it, Diane? How many people are trying to train and it's not working. Your trainees are not working out and you don't know where it's going wrong. So what we're going to talk about today is why it's going wrong.
Yeah.
What is the actual title, Diane?
Why your staff training doesn't work. There you go. That's our different working title today. So yeah, it's really interesting because a lot of the time, cleaning business owners, when they first start taking on staff, or even actually the more experienced ones, is they just can't understand why when somebody's working with them for 2 weeks, they're great, and then they leave them on their own, and it all just goes to pot. Is it an attitude problem? Or when I'm not there, they just want to do their own thing. And we don't believe that that's the reason that it's happening, do we? We think that actually it's a lack of structure.
Yeah, and again, I get why this is so hard because the reality is if you are starting to expand your team and maybe you're taking on your first trainee, your second, third, fourth, because we're probably not going to have a structured training until we're well past the fourth and fifth. Your only option is to go out and clean with them. And it's really hard to train in that way because often you've only got a set amount of work hours. You're fully booked in those work hours. So they come and clean alongside you and you're somehow hoping they'll pick up. So you're trying to explain to them, but you've still got to get the clean done. You're probably cleaning in a different room. So let's say you've trained them how to clean the bathroom. They then got to get on with it while you clean in the lounge and you come and check it afterwards. And we hope it's going to work. And it does sometimes work, doesn't it? But let's talk through how might be better.
Yeah. And I think that that strategy of hope, because that's what it is. You just hope that if you work with them for long enough, it will just sink in somehow. And like you said, it can work, but I'm not sure it's an actual strategy more than just a hope and pray thing, isn't it? And the challenge as well is you're not empowering them in any way. They're literally, you've just taken somebody on and they're just going out cleaning. I'm not sure there's any real training going on with this kind of hope strategy, is there?
No, it's hard because in some ways you empower them from the start because they've got so little training, they've got to make their own choices. So, maybe they are empowered, but are they empowered to deliver the values of your business? And are they empowered to be able to make informed decisions? Well, that completely depends on what they did before meeting you.
Yeah, and also I think there's sometimes an assumption that everybody knows how to clean, and I remember my first experience with somebody that didn't know how to change the settings on a vacuum head for a Henry, as an example. I just kind of assumed everybody knew that there's a little lever that goes up and down for hard floors and carpets. And then I realized, no, when I could hear somebody scratching along a floor with the carpet setting, I was like, oh, there's a little button. Oh, I didn't know that. And I'd not thought to train people on that, which sounds bonkers now as everything that I know. But that was a long time ago. And that's quite common that we just assume people will know what to do.
So let's talk about that one specifically for a second. So if, for example, I was following you around and you heard that I was scratching the floor, then you might come to me and say, oh, there's a carpet setting here. If you press that way, this happens, that's that floor, and this is that floor. And I may or may not remember this. Do you know how we train it? Let's go to the next step. Okay, so I actually train this one specifically. We take that Hoover head, vacuum head, turn it over, and we look at the size of it and you go, well, let's see this brush. How does it work? Let's actually look at it. How does it work?
The mechanics of it, yeah.
Yeah. When we've got the big on the Henry, let's talk about the Henry. I don't even train the Henry, but we do a similar version. When you're doing the rotating brush, you've actually got a massive area of which you're sucking through. And one of the questions I normally ask the staff is, do you think the suction's stronger over a bigger gap or a smaller gap? And they often will tell me that the suction's stronger over a bigger gap. And then we talk through it, right? And then, we talk through actually which head are you going to use? And do we need it up or down? And then they start to become empowered because they now understand the choices they're making. But even if they're just following you and you actually do feedback, this is hard floor, this is carpet, I guess you're then hoping they remember it.
Yeah, and I think you're right. Actually showing them the head, picking it up. Look, you can see the brushes come out, and then they'll start to understand, well, because you need the brushes for the hard floor because that protects the floor from the, the plastic or the metal of the head. So yeah, you're right. I think this is the key, isn't it? And we've talked about this in some of our other podcasts on training, is explaining, and then explaining why is actually more important than anything in the training, isn't it? And also, one of the things that when that 2 week time of they've been working with you for 2 weeks and then you put them on their own, or all of a sudden they're not good enough anymore, isn't it actually that you as the business owner have been sort of supporting them and actually covering for the slack in what they've been doing and not saying anything, and they've not been improving because you've been covering for them?
Yeah, so I think this is what happens time and time again. I told a lovely story. I'm just seeing if I've got my lovely story, but what happens is if they're like falling a little bit behind, then you automatically do the slack, and you kind of you're covering for them. So you're getting a little bit stressed out. But then the problem is you're never ever actually fixing the problem. The problem is they're not fast enough, they're not efficient enough, they're not methodical enough. And so when you send them out on their own, suddenly it becomes blatantly obvious and you get complaints. Well, come on, the warning signs were there long before that happened, weren't they? Like, if we're honest, suddenly your job's got easier when you've got rid of the trainee. If your job gets easier when you get rid of your trainee was probably not up to standard.
Yeah. And also we find this even when, it's not you doing the training, when you're expecting maybe one of your other team to suddenly step in and do the training, whether you've trained them to do that or not is another matter. But then they will be picking up the slack, and actually they will then start to not like training new people because they have to work twice as hard to cover the fact that the trainee isn't good enough yet, and they shouldn't be good enough yet. They've not completed their training. That's the whole point of the training. Sometimes you get the odd miracle that walks in on the first day and they get it, but I think I've only had one miracle in 17 years that didn't need training, or they still went through the program, but that technically didn't need the training and was up to speed super quick. But everybody else needs that time to get used to how we do things, even if they've got loads of experience.
And I think this is an interesting point because as a business owner, what I'm hearing you saying is people need time. And I'm hearing that's going to cost me money.
Yeah.
Like, that's the reality. If someone is taking, and let's keep the number simple, an hour and a half to do an hour's clean, and I'm paid for an hour's clean, yet I have to pay them for an hour and a half, I'm going, that sounds expensive to me. I mean, is that what I'm expected to do? Like, I don't mind them taking longer on the first day, but how soon should I expect them to be up to speed? Like, and how much is this going to cost me?
I remember when we did a recruitment masterclass, and I think we both did our numbers separately on our own recruitment processes, didn't we? I think it took both of us at least 6 weeks to break even on a new staff member. So for anybody starting out, it might not cost you as much, but actually it could potentially cost you more than that because you might not have the systems in place. That's the investment of money that you're going to have to make. And also investing this time and this money now that's why it's called an investment. It's for the future of that staff member and your business, because good training at the beginning is going to pay off later in quality, isn't it?
But let's talk about this because while we can sit there and work out the calculations as to how much it costs us, the reality is, let's say I'm doing 20 hours cleaning a week and then I have someone come and clean alongside me. And I often like talk to people and they say, well, I haven't got enough hours for them. And I'm like, well, have them clean alongside you. And they're like, well, we'll get it done in 10 hours. And I'm like, oh, you are hoping you'll get it done in 10 hours. That's not going to happen. It's probably still going to take you 20 hours. It takes a long time. And if you are going to take the time to do things like I've just explained, the Hoover head, well, that's 5 minutes just to explain how to do the Hoover head. You start adding this on and you either explain it or you're going to hope they work it out from the clues that you're giving them with them watching you when you may be going, press this button for that. You either spend the money up front in training them properly, and we do it in the office now, and they do get 6 hours over a couple of days in the office. You either spend that money up front or it's going to take 3 or 4 weeks to train them and you're going to spend it anyway. And I think that's
and you could end up spending it on complaints where you have to maybe go back and reclean, or actually, worst case scenario, you've put all that time and effort in, albeit maybe not in the right places yet, and that team member leaves after a couple of weeks because they get overwhelmed, they don't feel like the job's for them, maybe they just feel too stressed by it all and unsupported, and that they've made a mistake, and then they'll leave, and not only have you not kind of got it right in terms of the training, but you've lost another team member, and then you've got to go all the way back to the beginning of the recruitment process, and that's when it just gets too much for you. And then that's when we hear people going, I'm going back to be a solo cleaner, and this is too difficult.
But you know what I think one of the other things that is really hard? So one of the things we teach is the 4 steps in how to train someone. So it's, what is it? Tell, show, do, review. Now, if you're in a training session with me and I go, I tell you how to do it, I show you how to do it, you do it, and then I go, oh, you did this bit wrong, just fix that bit. Right? That's a really easy place. You're going to take that feedback without any problems. You go, okay, let me fix it now, blah, blah, blah. We're going to fix it step by step. If I don't do that, I'm going to be coming back to you in 8 days' time where you think you've got this, and I'm going to go, well, actually, you're doing this wrong. And your perception of the feedback at that point is actually a lot worse. I'm probably going to give you the same information that I gave you in the first step, but because you now think you can do it, you're going to now see me as nitpicking on, I might be telling you, you're actually standing wrong when you hold that mop. Well, if I taught you how to stand correctly to hold them up, and then I fixed it, and then you did it, and then I fixed it, and then you did it, and we spent 10 minutes with you standing correctly, it's a doddle. You are not going to tolerate me doing that 8 days later.
Yeah, when you've mopped how many floors, and then you're like, why is Louise just like picking on me? I can mop a floor. I've been doing it for the last week.
What's your problem with how I'm standing? Why do you care? And I'm going, well, I want to protect your back. And they're like, well, I've done it like this for years. Honestly, the hostility you get when you try and train later, and this is the problem, like it becomes really hard, and then you get that confrontation, and then you think that your trainee's got an attitude problem, they can't take feedback. Well, actually, had we trained them at the beginning, it's a very different perception of feedback at that point.
And what I loved in the masterclass was you talked about how you train somebody to mop. Now, most of us think, and it goes back to that, we should expect everybody to know how to do things. Actually, you were very clear about the length of the handle, because yours are adjustable, and where it should be, how they should stand, what position they should stand in, and you physically correct them, don't you, to make sure they're standing in the right position. A bit like I think you compared it to a tennis coach helping you serve. And this is key, isn't it? Because that becomes second nature to them once they've learned that correct position. And actually, once they get used to it, it'll actually feel more comfortable, won't it? Because they won't hurt themselves.
Yeah. And this is the problem. If a tennis coach comes into you while you're mid-game of tennis and goes, oh, if you did that, fix that bit, you are going to take that feedback on, but I'm playing tennis. Get out the way. I'm winning the game. I don't need your help. I didn't ask for it. At that point, you can see why people don't take the feedback on board. Whereas as a coach, if you at the beginning said, right, let's get you in the right position to serve. Let's practice. Let's adjust these bits. And then they go and play a game. Then, we're in a very different position to And I really think that we hear conflict after conflict about what happens is you train someone, they're great during training, then they go out, and then you've got attitude problems at this point. Well, it happens so regularly. Maybe we could look at why this is happening.
Is it the staff training and the fundamentally the structure of it? So we talked about the structure, and we talked about not investing the time and or the money into this. What about where we train them? Because that can have an effect as well, can't it? And I know that you talked in the masterclass, you told some stories about, sort of training in an empty house versus training in a house where the client is there, and then you've got a cluttered house, and then, so that can be really important, can't it, where you're doing the training?
Yeah, and I think, again, if we compare it to a tennis match, have you ever tried training someone while they're playing a tennis match? Or any sport? If you imagine, you see people that are playing football. Well, if you try to train them during a game, it doesn't work, like, because they've got,
Hang on a minute, bring that free kick back. You kicked it slightly wrong in the middle of a game. You can't do that. Yeah.
you can't do that. There's people watching, they want to see the game. You're doing a clean, there's customers there. People aren't in the learning zone. They're getting on, they're doing what they do best. And as the trainer, you're going, oh, we've got a few things wrong. What we need to do is take them out of that situation, because you wouldn't train during a match. And you see bad managers, right? You see this in football matches. And let's talk. I think are you a Man U fan?
I am, yes, for my sins at the moment, I think.
So I don't know anything about football in the actual game, but I do know how to train it. But what you see with good managers, they're not going out at half time demotivating the players by going, fix this. Oh, by the way, you did a shit kick over there. And I don't know. Like, what they do is they get them geared up. They get them during a game at halftime. What you want to do is get into their heads and get them in a positive frame of mind to go out and play the next one. So yes, you're giving some constructive feedback, but you're also thinking about their mental situation there as well. Whereas when we're training, we are just practicing the skills. It's the same with cleaning. If we're in a house, we are performing, whether you like it or not. We are putting on a show, and that customer is judging us, and they are looking at their perception of us, not just at training, but also how we do it. And they're going to judge how you speak to that cleaner that you may or may not be aware of. And when you're training in front of a client, you have to be really, really nice, really polite. You're on your best behavior. So when you suddenly speak to them slightly differently, they're going to go, well, who am I working with? In the next house, you haven't got somebody there. But also we're thinking about their frame of mind, because actually while they're performing, we need them in a positive frame of mind. I want them motivated to the end of the clean. Actually, when I'm training, I'm not thinking about their motivation. And I think this has to come into it. It is a little bit of performance of what's going on there.
I agree. And I think also, the cleaner that you're training, if there's a client around, they're aware that client is around, and they're already probably going to feel a little bit nervous and not a little bit unsure. It's a new job, and to then add the fact that somebody else might become aware of that, and that would make them feel extra uncomfortable. And so, yeah, training in a client's home when the client is likely to be there, for me, is a big no-no.
However lovely the client is, and they often are lovely. And don't forget, it's going to take longer. So it's going to take longer for you to do the clean as well. So you're there for longer, and you're starting to get a bit agitated, particularly if you've finished all your bits and they need to do their bits for practice. And you're like, what do I do? I'll do some more cobwebs. Let's clean the windows a bit more. And you almost, I don't know about you, but I can almost feel my tension rise when the training's going wrong.
And it's the urge to jump in and do it for them. And actually, that's a big no-no in training, because they're not going to learn it's like, we'll go back to the picking up the slack. If you're going to jump in and finish it for them, they're not going to learn how to do it properly and actually eventually do it more efficiently and probably quicker than you. They're not going to learn that if you jump in and take it away from them.
Yeah. So, I mean, we talked about what not to do an awful lot there, but I hope you picked up what to do along the way. So in terms of location, for me, take it out of the customer's house. Do it if you have to, in an empty property. Love an end of tenancy or an empty property where you're not being watched, you're not feeling the time pressures. Do it in your own house, do it in a village hall, do it in an Airbnb, do it wherever you want. If you've got an office, yay, it's a lot easier. You can do the training there. But do it wherever you want. But why train someone in the most pressured environment if there's another option?
Yeah, and allow the time for it as well. So great, you've got an empty client property. Normally it would take you 3 hours. You're going to need to allow at least 4 hours. And if it's a first clean, you could be 5 to 6 hours, couldn't you? So, you really are going to have to allow that time. So you gave the example of somebody working 20 hours a week. That could be both of you doing that 20 hours in that first week for you to dedicate yourself to actually training them properly for the future. It's an investment.
Which is hard for small businesses, because that's the only income coming in. And suddenly you go, oh my gosh, I've literally made a loss this week. I've been out working the same as I've always worked. And now that 20 hours, because you've still got to pay their salary. If you're not charging enough, which most people aren't, you're going to be at a loss.
Yeah, and even if you are charging enough, it's still costing you money. It's not oh, well, I've hired somebody, so now they'll work 10 hours, I'll work 10 hours, and we get paid for 20. That's not how it works.
Well, thank you very much. I hope that everyone that's listened to this has not just listened to what can go wrong. I've frozen again, haven't I?
Yeah.
I think it's going to keep doing this now. Just stop and start again. Thank you very much. And I hope that everyone that's listened to this not only has heard all the things that can go wrong, but actually has a bit of an idea how they'll start to solve some of these in their own businesses, and take this on board and go, I'll actually look at their own training processes and go, well, how can I improve my own training processes? If you want the practical tips from us, because we just talk through it on a podcast, we've done masterclasses in the DCBN library on how to actively improve this with really clear bullet point steps, what needs to happen. And obviously we talked about it in the last one. We're going to keep talking about training because the whole industry needs to become trained, insured and safe. So let's start with the business owners. Let's improve the training you're delivering. If you need help, we can do practical hands-on courses. They'll be rolling out early next year. Thank you for all your knowledge and help today, Diane, and we'll see you on the next one.
Thank you.